Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. Hope everyone is staying safe and healthy. My name is Bill Stith, and I am the Global Head of the Health Business Unit at Wipro. I'm excited to have this conversation today on advancing scientific research through the catalyst of crowdsourcing with Dr. Eva Guinan, researcher and practicing pediatric oncologist from Harvard Medical School, and Dave Messenger, Chief Technology Officer from Topcoder, a leading crowdsourcing platform. I think we can all agree that the world around us is witnessing an unprecedented pace of change, driven, of course, in no small part to COVID. Accordingly, the global health infrastructure and workforce is under tremendous strain with a new wave of patients, and researchers are on a race against time to fast-track vaccine development. When the human race is faced with major challenges, we sometimes see that this necessity becomes the mother of invention. With that, we are now seeing that innovation is accelerating across the full health continuum, from research and development, clinical trials, manufacturing, supply chain logistics, and clinical delivery to safely bring new drugs, medical devices, and procedures to market. It is incumbent on us to leave no stone unturned in empowering these pioneers to navigate this disruption and help advance scientific research through technology as a force multiplier. Technology and healthcare have had a symbiotic relationship in recent times, one leading to change in the other, where consumerism of technology has led to consumerism of healthcare and an increased expectation of convenience of care delivery. On the other hand, rising healthcare costs have led to disintermediation and industry convergence to the extent organizations like Haven are born. This has led for a need for technology to facilitate interoperability across industry actors like payers and providers. Research on the social determinants of health tells us that only about 10% of individuals' health status is influenced by the healthcare they receive. The remaining 90% is a function of their genomics, behaviors, and the environment in which people are born, grow, work, live, and age. The full value in healthcare will be unlocked only when researchers, pharmaceutical and manufacturers, device manufacturers, supply chain, insurance payers, both commercial and governmental, and healthcare systems evolve to a partnership model among practitioners, patients, and their families to align decisions with the patient's wants, needs, and preferences. To help support this acceleration and address the other 90%, we are starting to see emerging technologies such as augmented, virtual, and as an emerging trend, mixed reality being adopted that can unlock powerful health outcomes. The adoption of these kinds of technologies has traditionally been slow due to the long life sciences product lifecycle and high barriers to regulatory compliance. However, the global pandemic has accelerated this adoption. For example, augmented reality has been packed into an iPhone-based skin cancer lesion detection companion application. It's also been integrated into a lab informatics environment for laboratory execution systems. Virtual reality has been widely used for molecular modeling, optimizing facilities, clinician training, and patient education. We are seeing emerging application in some clinical therapies such as cognitive behavioral exposure therapy, post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, stroke, attention deficit, and autism spectrum disorders. Mixed reality is also being piloted by a number of companies for medical devices, such as robotic surgical instruments and field service engineering on analytical equipment. It is currently being used to some extent in plant operations in warehouses, where engineers make virtual changes to substrates, such as bodies, tissues, software, and hardware, with automation updating the changes in reality. At Wipro Health, we've been investing in deep partnerships with our clients, with our extended innovation ecosystem on artificial intelligence and robotic process automation. We've been empowering them with scalable automation architectures, governance frameworks, and machine learning-based decision management, so that their time is free to solve greater health challenges. Across the care continuum, from clinical trials, patient and member engagement, membership and billing, and claims administration, we've been continuously discovering, analyzing, and designing new automated processes and platforms. Some of this work requires highly skilled talent, experienced in data science, blockchain, and cognitive computing. The demand simply outweighs the supply here. Hence, apart from innovation and technology procurement models has allowed us to create new avenues of technology intervention, as you're about to hear from Dr. Guinan, not just on the application of AI, but also on how it is sourced. Through Topcoder, a leader in crowdsourcing from global premium programming talent, we're able to offer critical solutions at unprecedented velocities through exceptional talent. Dr. Guinan has been doing pioneering research on accurate delineation of tumors and reducing researcher bias. I'm excited to hear from her. Over to you, Dr. Guinan.
Hi. I'm Ava Guinan. As you heard, I'm a practicing bone marrow transplant physician and also clinical and translational researcher. And I'm really pleased to be able to talk with you today about this topic. This first slide is from Alice in Wonderland. It's a dialogue that gets cited a lot. And I think it's actually really appropriate for talking about the use of crowds and crowdsourcing in the setting of research. And the main message really is that this shouldn't be a particularly strange journey for us. The basic principles are all very much the same. You need a destination, you need a goal, you have a question that you want to answer. You need a map of what you're going to do. So that's how we always work in the lab. You need to be able to get yourself found if you're lost, and you need to be able to change directions if something gets in your way or something really unexpected happens. You need tools, you need resources, you need to learn from your mistakes and get better at the process. So today is really going to be about explaining how we can tweak and adjust our research processes by using the crowd and through crowdsourcing. What is it that we're trying to tweak? So there is a current paradigm by which we do research. And in that paradigm, which is really something that comes just from established practice, relatively small groups of people who have very common backgrounds and perspectives and basically share generically the same information base, get together, and they formulate questions and hypotheses, they generate data, they present to similarly inclined individuals who also have a lot of the same information base, same prejudices and same perspectives to get funded and to continue to do their work. And then it's pretty much rinse and repeat. So it's very confined. And who knows if this model, which has never been validated either for efficiency or for productivity, is even the model that would have arisen if we had started doing science in the data-rich and infrastructure-rich, tool-rich environment in which we practice today. Which takes us to Joy's Law. And Joy's Law is something that gets referenced a lot. You may very well have seen it. And this was a law, no matter who you are, most of the smartest people work for someone else, that was promulgated by Bill Joy of Sun Microsystems, and is generally discussed as a call to increasing the breadth of your search for information and expertise. And it is that, and that's important as a foundational principle for this discussion. But I've also overlain on that a different concept. And that's not just about the breadth of ideas, but also about their value. So if you look at this slide, what you see in the orange line is what you might expect from traditional experts. And this is supported by lots of different studies that people have done. So traditional experts to whom you take a question that falls within their area of expertise don't give you a lot of bad ideas. That would be to the left on this graph. They give you a lot of very reasonable and tractable ideas. That's the peak of the curve here. And they give you a small number of really high value, novel and transformative ideas. On the other hand, if you go to non-traditional participants in your search process, the way that you would if you were crowdsourcing, you get a lot of solutions that have almost no value or have very low value. And you get a reasonable proportion that have as good value, moderate value, as that's provided by traditional expertise. But what you do get consistently from study to study is a higher number of solutions that are really, really novel and can be transformative in terms of addressing the question that you care about. So how does that sort of shake out in our research universe? And I'm going to take you through, in the interest of time, to maybe 2.5 examples to try to illustrate how some of those principles come into play. So here's an example of a crowdsource that we did in which we were really trying to address a very complicated scientific need. And specifically, this was trying to improve the megablast algorithm, which is was seated for many years and is still on a mainframe computer down at the NIH. And this is a sequence alignment algorithm. You can use it for DNA or RNA, protein sequences, whatever you want. You submit your data, it gets in a queue, and when it gets run, it gets run. And the issue was, could we make it faster and more accurate? And scientists had actually been given R21s and R01s to work on this problem for many years. Why was this an important question? It was important because of the very data explosion that Bill just referenced, which has been creating research and clinical bottlenecks for quite some time. We ran a 2-week crowdsource around this question for a very modest amount of money. And at the end, 122 software coders, none of whom, and we did a survey, had worked in biomedical computational science. None of them were academicians. None of them had worked on this particular problem before, submitted a total of 654 submissions. And if you follow the arrow to your right, what you see is what happened here. So shown in the black triangle is the response or the output of Megablast down at NIH to this problem, which was about recombining and sequencing structures related to antibody. So there's the speed shown on the x-axis and the accuracy shown on the y-axis. The scientist who helped us with formulating this problem was someone who had in fact gotten a grant from the NIH to work on it, and his solution, his best solution, is shown in the green square. And you can see that he was able to move the speed more than a log over, a log faster, and he was considerably more accurate than the standard NIH solution. And all of the circles represent solutions that were proffered by our crowdsourced community. And you can see in the top, in the right oval, those which actually had the most dramatic responses in terms of both speed and accuracy. You'll also notice in the scatter toward the left that there were lots of solutions that were even faster. There weren't really any, except for this top group, that were more accurate, but that you can get a sort of distribution of results. And what you see in that top group is that there are many, many solutions to a long-standing problem. These were solutions derived in only 2 weeks that actually increased both the speed and accuracy of this algorithm. And in fact, using this algorithm, one could annotate 10 million sequences in under 3 minutes and 250 million sequences in about an hour on a laptop computer, your own laptop computer, not something particularly spiffy. And that was pretty dramatic because actually Megablast couldn't even order 250 million sequences at all. It couldn't take in the information. However, that is astonishing, but what's most interesting, I think, for researchers is actually what I've highlighted in red below. And that is that by analyzing the approaches that were submitted, we found that there were 89 different approaches to solve the problem. So this isn't just that you can learn or achieve an end goal of faster and more accurate, but you can also get insight into different ways to solve your problem. So maybe we got lucky, maybe there were just a couple of really great coders in that community, but who cares? Who knows if you could do this as well? Well, the answer is not luck. This is robust. 7 years later, we ran the same contest again for slightly more money, slightly longer, got about the same number of participants, and the same proportion of people actually beat the benchmark. But this wasn't the Megablast benchmark. We used our own benchmark, which was significantly better than that of the original solution. And you can see that they beat that benchmark by quite a bit. And we also set an expectation ceiling. So we said, well, before we saw this degree of improvement, we want to see how much, starting from this higher baseline, we can get similar improvement. And in fact, a reasonable proportion actually even beat that expectation ceiling, with the winner doing so very dramatically. So there's also capacity to iterate. Now, we were pretty encouraged by those and other successes and decided that we would take on a very difficult, very complicated therapeutic problem, which we think of as being conserved to those people who have a lot of specialty expertise. And what was this problem? To set the stage, this is about lung cancer. So lung cancer is the second most common cancer diagnosis in the United States. It's the leading cause of cancer-related death. Those already awful statistics actually pale in comparison to what's happening in the developing world, where lung cancer, where 2/3 of lung cancer diagnoses come from. And in the developing world, the reach of healthcare and density of healthcare providers is actually dramatically reduced compared to in the United States, where we already have limitations, particularly with respect to radiation therapists. Now, radiation therapy is a core therapeutic for lung cancer. It's used in 20 to 50% of cases as a minimum. This is widely unavailable and limited in the developing world. So we wanted to see if we could come up with an algorithm that could reproduce the work of a trained radiation therapist interested in thoracic oncology, lung cancer stuff, so that they could either leverage the effort of people in the United States, for example, and perhaps even wholly replace or really leverage the effort of a more limited workforce in the developing world. So we again ran a contest. We set a benchmark comparison, which was that of an average radiation oncologist, and existing automated tools that were using other algorithms to do the same thing. Now, to be clear, this is not a simple task. This is not the stuff you read all the time where somebody can diagnose or see that there's a tumor on an X-ray. This is actually doing the conformal mapping of a lung cancer in three-dimensional space to define the volume to which the radiation therapy is going to be delivered. So that is important both for targeting the cancer and for not targeting normal tissues. And some of these examples of just where cancers sit are shown here on the bottom. But on the right, what you see is what happened through various phases of this project. And we did phase it because we had learned that you could see from the outcome during a crowdsourcing exercise where your weaknesses in definition were, where the new opportunities to improve the contest were. And you see that clearly here, shown in the bottom left in the bluish sort of color, phase one, where the solutions that were proposed to the initial contest. And you can see that they weren't all that good. And we were surprised because it was way worse than we expected. And when we looked at what was going on, it was what we had done wrong. And that's a critical message here. He's involved in doing crowdsourcing, and we had asked them to be both the radiologist and the radiation therapist, which means we gave them an X-ray, and basically they had to find the tumor, and then they had to contour it. And not even the radiation therapists do that. They get a diagnosed patient, and then they develop a therapeutic. So we did a phase two where we just dropped a pin into the middle of the tumor so people knew where it was, and then asked them to do the same work again. And here you can see in phase two, shown in the green, how dramatically improved the results were when we had formulated an appropriate question. And in fact, we then went on to do, and I'm just going to take you rapidly to where it says ensemble, something again different. And this is just to illustrate that crowdsourcing is not just one thing, it's what you can make of it and how you think about phrasing the problem. So we saw that there were 5 solvers, all of whom had reached very high levels solutions. Each of them had done one aspect of the work particularly well. So we took those 5 people, contacted them through Topcoder, and asked them to work collaboratively in a last arm where they each took their own particular strengths to create an ensemble solution. And when we did that, we were as good as our radiation therapist, and we were better than the available algorithms. So crowdsourcing can create value. In fact, crowdsourcing can create a lot of value for researchers. And for today's purpose, I have divided that up into 3 different areas: outcomes, processes, and what I'm calling the idea space. So if we talk about outcomes, we're talking about the kinds of things that you might really want to see with a contest or in your own laboratory when you're doing something. You want to see something go faster. You want to get to a solution faster. You want accuracy. You want to improve accuracy in your measurements. And also you want validation. You want to be able to do things in a way that you understand that they are robust and true. And crowdsourcing offers in all cases, the opportunity to do that. And you can add other sorts of outcome measures there as well. It's also interesting that you can validate your own result. For example, if you were concerned about whether a solution you had come up with was robust for something, you can actually put it out there and let other people play with it and validate it before you incorporate it further or publish it. So next, let's talk about process. What the process of using a crowdsourcing platform offers you is a lot. It offers you access to a group of people interested in coming up with solutions using whatever kinds of skills you're calling on. It's not always just computational. It offers you efficiency. We all know that when we get grants, it takes a long time to get a grant. It takes a long time to get any sort of payment process with a consultant or an outside entity set up. All of those relationships are already taken care of, and they've been taken care of well and thoughtfully with respect to legal and other obligations. And it offers you partnership with people with a lot of experience in the same way that we demand those sorts of attributes of our regular, if you will, research collaborators. Those are also on offer here. And lastly, let's just talk about the idea space for a second. And that is what I was trying to illustrate by saying that there were 89 different previously unrecognized solutions to the sequencing algorithm problem. This offers you an opportunity to connect with people who have very different perspectives, often from other industries, from other application spaces on your problem, and who have a variety of skills. I don't care how big your computational biology department is. This is much, much bigger, and the skill base is much broader. And lastly, and I think most compellingly for those of us who love science and who love trying to answer complicated problems, it can offer you real insights into different ways to do your own work. You know, maybe I wouldn't have liked any of the solutions to the sequence problem, and maybe I wouldn't have liked the final ensemble for our radiation therapy problem. But I guarantee you that I would have liked some of the approaches and insights that were provided by the crowd that we were using, and those could have propelled our own work forward independent of the solutions that we already got. So to kind of get back to the motif of Alice and being on a journey, as shown here on the left, you know, this is not a place where you just sort of go down, sit in the middle of the road, and consider where it is you're going and realize that you don't have what it takes to get there. This is something, and that's shown on the right here, somewhat metaphorically, but nonetheless, this is something that requires planning, it requires an agenda, it requires definition, it requires tools and resources. But if you have a goal, if you've got the resources, you have good plan and good partners, just like the rest of our research, and that's why I say it's not really a strange journey, you will get to the kinds of answers and validations that you need to move your work forward. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dave Messenger, who is the CTO of Topcoder.
Thank you, Dr. Guinan. This is Dave Messenger, the CTO of Topcoder. And I just wanted to say it always gets me excited to hear about our clients talk about what they've accomplished with the platform, what they've been able to deliver. The slide here I'm showing you shows the Topcoder community. We've been around now for almost 20 years with over 1.5 million members. I think what stands out to me is the diversity of the Topcoder community. So when you think about Topcoder, we're global and diverse, which I think is what you really heard from Dr. Guinan's speech, is that she's able to tap into resources from around the world. We have about 50% of our resources students college age, 50% are professional. So you can not only get access to amateur talent, but also professional talent. You're able to pull in people, different genders, different regions of the world. Having that diverse community really helps drive access to resources, experience levels, geographies, different approaches, new ideas. So that's really a key point to accessing Topcoder, is really accessing that diversity. And this is what I think even now, when you start thinking about everything going on with COVID, is that our community is really adept at working online, and it gives really a power resiliency to organizations that are tapping this online community. You're able to not only augment your team, but find excellent talent from around the world. You can see here that Topcoder has been able to help a variety of enterprises by being able to supply on-demand access to talent. One in particular I wanted to point out here was Paul Hilfko from Wellmark. He's the Chief Experience Officer and Technology Officer. I think Paul's doing an amazing job in the health area of how to really look at an all-in talent strategy. So he's been able to look, if you look at his organization, whether it's been college intern programs, his own employees, pulling in strategic partners from the industry, and also including crowdsourcing and Topcoder as one of his platforms of choice. You know, what I think is interesting when you hear Paul speak about this is that getting access to different ideas, different approaches, that's really powerful to Wellmark, because not only are you getting the diversity of thought, but diversity of skill set, and being able to access that talent on demand is incredibly powerful to how he is delivering for his company. I'd also like to talk through a few case studies that are very specific to the healthcare industry. The first one I'm going to show you here is for a major pharmaceutical company where we help them with their R&D. This one is extremely timely because it talks about COVID and the Delphi COVID prediction model. So in this example, the pharmaceutical company came to Topcoder, and they needed access to fast expertise to be able to turn a white paper model into a working digital model for vaccine trials planning. You know, we were able to, within 24 hours, get a data scientist assigned and working with the client immediately. We collaborated with MIT's researchers to help understand the model, and then we updated and executed that model specifically against that pharmaceutical company's data. Now it's been deployed. We're providing ongoing support. We did this all remotely for a fixed price, and even the support is under a fixed model. So we took the model that was more of an industry scientific model, and we're able to customize it for this pharmaceutical company and get it deployed for the customer. You can see here the dashboards were modeled after the Johns Hopkins University's dashboards. We were able to kind of take those JHU dashboards, improve performance, and tweak it for our pharmaceutical client. And not only does it run in the cloud if they have access to it, but if they also want to run it locally on the desktop, they're able to run and tweak these models. You can see too, the model that we took, we also tweaked that model to be able to add in other kind of key data points and utilities that are more interesting to the pharmaceutical company, such as tracking total hospitalized, total detected cases in care, and other key attributes of the model. Just to show you how Topcoder works as well, we were able to run a design challenge where we got multiple different looks and feels to how this data model would look. So you can see here's a few different screenshots of how the dashboards would look. So very quickly you're able to see the data in a real way and tweak how it's going to look, how you want to present it to your end customers. Another example I wanted to show is I wanted to pile on Dr. Guinan's example of the Harvard tumor hunt. This one was one of probably my most favorite pieces of work we've done at Topcoder over the last 20 years, just because of the fact that we were able to help contribute to lung cancer. And not only is it the detection, but really on the treatment of lung cancer. And I think what Dr. Guinan mentioned before is really important to talk about, is that we were able to take this problem and break it into 3 stages that allowed the best people and the best ideas to come to the forefront during that stage. So as we mentioned before, we started with really an algorithm to delineate the lung cancer tumor. We then took the best people from that challenge and narrowed it down to 11 competitors that were then able to pair with experts. So combining those generalists and people that you find from the community with your subject matter experts is a key point. And then being able to train that algorithm to take in that SME's feedback and come up with a much better model. And then lastly, we took the top 5 of those people to incorporate that final feedback from physicians and experts and narrow down to build a highly accurate algorithm that can be used in treatment. And this algorithm was also published within the last year or so in the Journal of American Medical Association, the JAMA journal. So I'll wrap up. My last spot here is I did want to just show that these are stats that we've had at Topcoder that were all pre-COVID. So it's pretty amazing that if you see these numbers being published by such publications as The Economist, where they say by 2020, 40% of the workers will take part in the gig economy, and that millennials are increasingly looking for more flexibility in their careers. This is even pre-COVID, where now everyone's working from home. I think the acceleration of this model is going to go faster and faster. So I think, when you're looking at your organization, you should be really thinking of what is the best way to tap talent and what is an all-in strategy that you can look at. You don't want to just look at full outsourcing or hiring or going full crowd, but how do you leverage the right platform, the right talent strategy to deliver for your organization? And this is already happening now. It's going to continue to accelerate because of the COVID experience everyone's gone through. So happy if anyone wants more information on Topcoder, feel free to reach out. I'm going to hand it back to Bill now for the Q&A session.
As Dr. Guinan and Dave outlined, the power of data and AI offers exciting new possibilities for the future of healthcare. This global fight against COVID reminds us that no business affects people's lives in quite the same manner as healthcare. It is a new normal, and I envision all our best endeavors focus on designing for the new care continuum as we innovate for this new collaborative interconnectedness. At Wipro, we continue to partner with our clients to deliver better patient outcomes. The innovation ecosystem must integrate the best in technology, strategy, and design. Hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. I look forward to any questions that you may have for any of us. And I can see one in the Q&A section that Dr. Guinan could answer. Dr. Guinan, the question is, what are the implications for crowd innovation and the limitations of oncology? And the second part is it a model that we easily welcomed within the research community?
Okay, so I think I'm going to take those in reverse order. I don't think that crowdsourcing is really easily welcomed in the research community, and in part, I think that's a reflection of the fact that it's poorly understood. So that it will be very useful for researchers to understand how this doesn't supplant their own efforts, how it's really complementary, how some of the issues that we discussed earlier about stimulating new ideas and opening new paths, as well as providing efficiencies, can really complement the work that they do. And I think that will help with acceptance. And that is, I might add, why it's actually important to work with platform companies, because it helps to resolve all the difficult problems that researchers aren't particularly adept at either, in terms of contracting and things like that. So I think the fears around those administrative issues also keeps a lot of people away from the table. And I think when they have some experience, they realize how readily those issues can actually be addressed. With respect to oncology, oncology has become an incredibly data-rich field. We have genomic data, we have antibody on T-cell receptors and B-cell receptors that really reflect our increased understanding of immuno-oncology. We have a huge amount of imaging. So those are pixels and pixels worth of data that we get on patients, and of course pathology data. And all of those are areas where sort of smart computational insights and efficient processing of information are incredibly important to getting to the goal of true individualized, personalized oncologic care. So I think the potential is really untapped. And the likelihood that individual researchers have at their disposal the breadth and disciplinary divergence and expertise that's represented by the crowd is pretty close to zero. So it's important to take advantage of this workforce and their insights to do our work.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, I think, and I know we've talked before about the opportunities that getting further automation and getting more responses in the broader community globally, new perspectives, really can help enable and accelerate and provide opportunities, right, for researchers to focus in new areas to expand upon, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And also, there's such diversity across the world in terms, again, of genotypes and the way pathology is processed and so on. And to the degree that one can address some of that computationally, you can really level that data so that it can all get used and so that it can also be used for stratification as you develop better heuristics for dealing with those data sets. It really also contributes a lot. And I think that these communities have a lot to contribute in that regard as well.
There seems to be a question here too about Topcoder. It kind of piles on to the last topic you were talking about, is how do we weave on-demand talent into traditional talent ecosystem, especially when internal teams can feel like on-demand talent is a threat to their jobs. And I think that's sort of what you were just talking about, Dr. Guinan, too, is it's just another tool, right? Like, you want to make sure that you have the best and the brightest, and you're giving them the best tools to drive the best results and the best outcomes. So by providing access to talent and diversity of skill sets, diversity of opinions, that maybe your team can focus on one item, and then things that they can outsource other pieces to the crowd or the community to get other ideas, other approaches. I think it just comes down to viewing it not as outsourcing of work, but really as just another tool in your arsenal of how you can go about solving your job. And we've seen that happen, whether it's in research or in software development. Sometimes people don't like to do as much QA work. You can send the QA work to the crowd, or you can send design if you're not the world's best graphic designer. So I think there's a lot of ways where you can augment your own skill set of your own team in a way that doesn't seem as if it's taken away from your own resources.
Yeah, no, I think that is exactly on point. I think it needs to be seen as a collaboration, as leverage, and really as no different than taking your samples and sending them to the core. I mean, just because the core is at your own institution doesn't mean that you're actually doing the work. Someone else is doing the work. I mean, they're dealing with it. You're not. And yet we find that comfortable. But here, somehow, because it's external and maybe because it is, clearly intellectual work and contribution, it's less comfortable. But that's not a productive way to work. And I also think that people need to do for themselves in a universe in which resources are limited. And for research, currently, they are quite limited in many ways. The difference between taking some of money and time to set up collaboration with a unit of people who are very oriented toward doing the work and bring you huge numbers of positives versus the likelihood that you can accomplish the same amount with the same amount of money to hire a single individual who requires a lot of training and integration, and then who, doesn't, who's then there after you've answered the question. And then this sort of creates other problems in the chain of doing research if it was sort of a one-time need. I mean, these are different kinds of considerations, and we as a community need to really become educated to thinking about them intelligently, researchers are not the best administrators. They don't have a lot of management training, and to embrace it intellectually as well. So I agree completely with what you said.
So kind of in line with that, the next question I'll take. This is I think I can pick up. The question is, you have mentioned about WIPRO's focus on designing for the nuclear continuum. Can you give us an example of how you've done this in the real world? So much like we've talked about, nothing more so than the pandemic, this critical element of the change, right? But the whole world is focused on doing things differently, right? If you look at healthcare in the U.S., where the large amount of the U.S. GDP is spent on healthcare, and what's evolving is how people receive that care, right? How they're, if you look at the acceleration of vaccines we talked about, and trying to really transform and disrupt that model because of necessity, right? And in one example I can really think about is we have a client that provides as a large group purchasing organization, and they serve nearly 4,000 hospitals, right? And their challenge around that is, how do you get supplies in a model, especially in COVID, right? If people are consuming healthcare in a different way because they have to, right? They couldn't go for elective procedures into the hospital because of the acute care challenge and really reserving that space for COVID response. But people still needed to get that non-acute care, and that required the continued movement of supplies that maybe originally were intended to go to an acute care hospital to non-acute. And how do you really transform that? And there's a view that we won't really return back to that full model, right? The new normal and the way people choose to receive healthcare will be different. So the challenge was, how do we create a new e-marketplace for those nearly 4,000 hospitals that need to get supplies in a different way? So instead of doing the traditional model, they engaged us to help them redesign in a different kind of user experience where people could come on, much like you would get at a consumer online shopping site today, with supplies delivered to your home. And so we worked with them to identify that through digital and design it, to look at the new way people experience it, and do it in a way that would supply the limited, minimum amount of margins. How could we deliver a good position? So through that process of online, we developed it, we rolled that out, and it's in market today. And it was fortunately rolled out prior to COVID, and we saw a huge acceleration in that space, which is really meeting the needs of a different kind of consumption of not only healthcare, but ordering of supplies, as an example, delivery of those supplies. Okay, as we're about out of time here, I'd like to thank Dr. Guinan and Dave for your time and working with me on this panel. These are stories that give us all here at WIPRO Health an immense pride. We're happy to hear your stories and ideas for designing for the new care continuum, or any other questions you may have. Do feel free to reach out to us as directed on the screen, and we'll be more than happy to help. Thank you all. Thanks, Dr. Guinan. Thank you, Dave.